It's going to be a difficult election year for Rishi Sunak as he tries to cling on to power amidst a complete collapse in the Tories' credibility. And in what looks like the start of his election campaign, he has given his first big interview of the year to the BBC. But it wasn't long before the cracks began to appear. That's because Sunak appears to be at risk of falling or failing the right-wing Tory purity test, at least according to reports that emerged over the weekend. They claim that, while Chancellor Sunak had doubts about the Tory right's holy grail, the Rwanda scheme. That's bad news for a Prime Minister who's already alienated some of his more rabid backbenchers who see him as too weak on issues like breaking international law. So when he appeared on the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg show, Sunak was keen to dispel any doubts.
I'm asking you to say completely clearly whether you ever had any doubts about whether or not sending migrants to Africa from UK shores would put people off making the journey across the Channel.
Well, this hasn't been tried before in our country. I mean, it's fair to say it is novel. I've been very clear that this is a novel scheme. Of course it's novel, but actually we should have more confidence today that it will work precisely because we've got a returns agreement with Albania that is working incredibly well.
And a separate thing about sending people back to the country that they were
no,
from.
The principle. Well, that's where I disagree with you, because I think the principle is the same. Because the principle is this: if you come here illegally, you shouldn't be able to stay here, and you will be returned either to your home country or indeed to a safe alternative like Rwanda. The principle is that you won't be able to stay here because we will have somewhere else to send you. And that is the deterrence that I think is so important. The National Crime Agency agrees, and that's why I'm so keen to get this scheme up and running. But look, people will disagree. The Labour Party disagrees with that principle, by the way, about having a deterrence and having a workable returns agreement. My view is you cannot solve this problem without having a proper deterrent, and Rwanda is how we will deliver that.
And Keir Starmer will be here next week, so we'll put lots of questions.
I'm sure you will ask him.
We will ask him lots of questions
how you solve this problem without a deterrent
Today we're here to talk about what you think.
Now, I have no doubt that Rishi Sunak is a smart guy. Like, clearly he's intelligent to some degree, right? He had a successful career. I'm sure he did well in school and university. So he must know that what he's saying is complete nonsense. Right. The reason, whether or not you like them, so separate from the ethics of all of this, we're talking about what works. The reason the deal with Albania worked is because anyone who comes to Britain from Albania now, there's a high chance they're going to get sent back to Albania because there is a deal with the Albanian government. Obviously, the Albanian government isn't going to particularly struggle to, absorb Albanians because they've only just left there, right? So that deal meant that everyone who came from Albania, will quite likely, it's highly likely that they'll get sent back to Albania. Now, of course, that's a massive deterrent. That's a massive deterrent. You're not going to bother trying to get to a country if you think there's a really, really high chance that you're going to get sent back. The Rwanda scheme is this idea that you're going to send about 500 people out of 50,000 people, and suddenly then all 50,000 people are going to say, oh no, there's a risk that 2% of us will get sent to Rwanda, so we're not going to come anymore. Now, I mean, it's quite obvious, isn't it, that people who are coming from, sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, all the way to the UK, they're taking a lot of risks, right? They're taking a lot of risks. On that journey, there's probably more than 2% chance, sadly, that, people will be in a life-threatening situation. People do pass away on those journeys. So people are already taking a much bigger risk than the 2% chance that they get sent to Rwanda. So the idea that this is similar to the Albania policy is just nonsense. And as I say, this is all separate from, you don't have to agree on migration being good or migration being bad. This is just simple logic that what Rishi Sunak is saying is nonsense. It seems very risky for me that you're going into an election with a policy that is nonsense, because I think lots of other people are going to also realize it's complete nonsense. We've got more from that interview in a second, so stay with us. On Friday, though, we mentioned our fundraiser and showed you how close we were to hitting 4,000 new supporters. Let's take a look at where things stand now. Thank God we have hit 4,042. Would have been embarrassing if we didn't. So thank you so much for those of you who did sign up as a new regular supporter over the weekend. And we have achieved our weekend ambition, which is to hit 4,000 new paying subscribers. That graph evidently shows you we still want another 1,000. We desperately want to get up to 5,000 new paying supporters. So we are in shipshape to report on the coming general election. So if you aren't already a subscriber, please do go to novaramedia.com/support. That link is in the description. Back to Sunak. The Rwanda scheme is likely to be a major part of Sunak's election strategy as he tries to appease the Tory right. But another major plank of his plan is straight out of the traditional Tory playbook. Pay for tax cuts for the better off by coming down hard on those on welfare. Speaking to The Telegraph, Sunak has promised more tax cuts delivered by what he calls discipline, especially when it comes to social spending and especially when it comes to other people. Now, that pledge came up again on the BBC, where Sunak said this.
What we've seen over the past couple of years is a very significant rise in the number of people who are being deemed unfit to work. And that's something that is concerning to me. I believe very strongly in the importance of hard work and rewarding hard work, which is why we're cutting taxes on work as of this weekend very significantly. Now, in the last decade, that system hasn't been reformed at all. And you've seen the number of people who are signed off has tripled. Now, do I think our country is 3 times sicker than it was a decade ago? The answer is no. I think the system is not working as it was designed to work. And now we are bringing forward reforms that will mean that we look at the eligibility for who is signed off sick. That won't affect all those on existing benefits. It will come in over time on people who are newly presenting to the welfare system. And that is something I think is the right thing. It's about fairness. It's about making sure that everybody who can work does work. And for everyone who is working hard, we reward that hard work with tax cuts. But that is a conservative approach. It's one that I think is right for our country.
It doesn't seem self-evident to me that the country isn't 3 times sicker. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the statistics, but we are an aging society. Like the number of older people in our society is dramatically increasing. Now, obviously, this isn't including pension age people. This is working age people, but a lot of them will sort of, people are more likely to be sick if they're in that 55 to 65 band than if they're in the 35 to 45 band, for example. So sort of people being a bit sicker might be not too surprising. Also, long COVID is real, right? Has it made us 3 times sicker? I don't know. But it seems like that's something that should be studied as opposed to just asserted. Helena, what do you make of this story and I suppose this pitch from the Conservatives to say we're spending too much money on people who are too sick to go to work? The implication there that a bunch of them must be able to go to work. We're not 3 times sicker, but 3 times more people are claiming these benefits. Therefore, a number of them are claiming them when they don't really need to. How would you respond?
Well, I mean, I think this is respective of a broader kind of essentially mistruth, really, that there is this unknown but large contingent of the non-working people who are signed off from working who are there erroneously. Lots of people believe this to be self-evident, despite there actually being no evidence. Interesting that he claims, we're not 3 times bigger than we were. I mean, hospital waiting lists are definitely much longer than they used to be, and that's a deliberate fault of his government. I mean, maybe not him specifically, but definitely the fault of George Osborne, definitely the fault of Philip Hammond, definitely the fault of NHS budgets dropping as a share of GDP every year from 2010 to 2018. And of course, we had a pandemic. These are all things that contribute to the level to which people get signed off as unable to work. And one of the largest groups of those people are people who have mental health problems. Another failure of essentially their economic management of being able to ensure that people have good enough standards of living that they don't have mental health problems, which it's not a secret that mental health issues have massively increased in accordance with the drop in living standards that we've seen over the period of this Conservative government because of continual austerity budgets. And this contingent that they try and tell us exists of people who are signed off to work who should actually be working, it doesn't exist. They was running with this pitch of you before the year ended on things like Question Time, saying, well, people can work from home now, so surely there are a bunch of disabled people who previously were signed off who could now do at least some working from home, which fundamentally misunderstands how disability even works, how people can have some energy some days and some days not. Maybe there's some schemes that you can do to have them working in with lots of help to do it, with like a kind of a carrot rather than a stick. But all they're trying to do here is just reduce the welfare budget through punitive measures by essentially creating a mistruth to the public about a group of people who, from what I've seen from all the evidence that you hear from disabled activists, that just don't exist, that just completely don't exist. On top of that, he has no mandate for welfare cuts. He has no mandate for this kind of continual desire for budgetary austerity, because that's not what the platform that he was elected on. The Boris Johnson manifesto in 2019 promised things like the continual uprating of the welfare budget in line with inflation for things like benefits. So there was no mandate for this. There's no appetite for austerity in terms of the public consciousness. When they get asked about what they want to see happen with public spending, they want to see public spending go up, not down, for small tax cuts that don't really exist in reality, because when you look at fiscal drag, that outdoes all the tax cuts they've done so far anyway. All of this rhetoric about, we're a tax cutting government now, all of this New Year's tax cut on national insurance they've given us, when really and truly for the vast majority of the population, the tax burden is still increasing because of fiscal drag. And there's like a very small section of middle income or slightly above middle income earners who get a bigger tax cut from the national insurance cut than they lose from the fiscal drag. Interesting, that very small swing demographic might see a slight reduction in taxes. Everybody else's taxes are still going up because of fiscal drag. So it's incredible that he can just get away so often with so many of these myth-truths. And of course, does he ever get called out on these myth-truths? Very, very rarely by our press. And that's very frustrating to me.